Realm presents Orphan Black, The Next Chapter, starring Tatiana Maslany. Episode 9.
Greg Kurtzman lived in a cliché. The cliché he lived in was one of those tiny rabbit hutch condos with a sharp blue sliver of lake view and the ceaseless roar of the Gardiner Expressway below. The place couldn't have been more than 450 square feet. The furniture and fixtures looked like they'd all been purchased from the same in-flight magazine. Stainless steel appliances greasy with fingerprints, an uncomfortably angular black leather sofa, a clear lucite coffee table, a 4K widescreen so large it actually curved, like a satellite meant for collecting attention. Floor-to-ceiling windows with poor insulation howled and shuddered each time the wind from Lake Ontario rushed past. The bathroom was tiled entirely in a Greek key pattern. Kurtzman had black sheets under a faux leather headboard, complete with faux leather handcuffs. It was the zenith of banality, the height of edgelord chic. Alexander Davis winced as he sat down in the ultra-modern contrivance that Kurtzman had mistaken for a chair. It was a slate-gray lump that cupped him like a prostate exam. It smelled like it was 3D printed. It probably was. It was probably outgassing petrochemicals and giving him cancer right this very second. Still, it was the best piece of furniture with a view to the door, which meant that Davis would see Kurtzman the moment he came in. When Kurtzman did finally arrive, he looked like shit. Multiple cuts on his face and arms, a sunken, hollow look around the eyes that spoke of little sleep and even less on the horizon. He had the 1,000-yard stare of a man who had just finished a long drive fueled by salted coffee and too many donut holes. Davis saw this by the light of Kurtzman's refrigerator as the man dug around inside its bright and empty cavern for the last bottle of an insipid Mexican beer. Kurtzman had not bothered to turn on the lights in the condo. When he turned, Davis snapped his lighter open to light a cigarette. Kurtzman dropped his beer. It shattered on the floor. Fuck! Language, Mr. Kurtzman. Kurtzman didn't waste any more breath before drawing a weapon, a Glock 23 which seemed comically large in his hands. Davis blinked at him slowly. Do you even know how to use one of those, Mr. Kurtzman? I thought they weren't very popular up here. Yeah, well, contrary to popular belief, we're not all bleeding heart polar bear kissing pussies up here. Some of us actually know how to get things done. Now who the hell are you? I'm someone who wants to make you a deal. Kurtzman frowned. What kind of deal? He blinked and shook himself. Something appeared to have gone wrong with his basic cognitive processes. It might have been exhaustion, or it might have been a significant blow to the head. I mean, how did you get here? How did you get inside? Davis waved his hand. I would try to buy into a better building next time. A view of Lake Ontario is no substitute for decent security and a good relationship with your doorman. He nodded at the gun. You can shoot me, but doing so would only add to your problems. And you look like you already have more than your fair share of problems. Kurtzman's frown deepened, but he put the gun on the tiny black marble kitchen counter. Not that the room he was standing in could really be considered a kitchen. It was more a collection of appliances stacked on top of each other with a sink in the middle. Kurtzman turned back to the refrigerator, then eyed Davis warily. Do you want a beer? No, thank you. Kurtzman grabbed another one, stepped over the spilled beer and glass debris of his first bottle, and entered the postage stamp that was made to resemble a living room. He sank slowly into the fake mid-century modern sofa. The leather, or more likely polyurethane, squeaked and crinkled as he tried to get comfortable. It was impossible. Nothing in the condo was designed for comfort. Davis imagined that Kurtzman's place in Ottawa was much nicer. This was a crash pad, and it wasn't very well padded. Who are you, really? Davis crossed his legs. An emissary from your neighbors to the south, he said. I'm here for something that was promised to me. For what? Look, jackass, I don't even know who you are. I haven't promised you shit. Sturgis did. He promised me a weapon. And as far as I know, you're the only one who can deliver. Before Kurtzman could respond, Davis had his own weapon out and pointed into Kurtzman's face. Without letting the gun's aim waver, he casually laid his cigarette on the arm of his chair, rose, and walked over to the kitchen counter, then pocketed Kurtzman's weapon with his free hand. Kurtzman's face was turning a truly enjoyable shade of puce. "Well?" Davis asked, and deliberately angled his gun to point at Kurtzman's left knee. Look, I don't have it. It was stolen." Davis watched Kurtzman's fear shift to anger. It wasn't particularly intimidating, but that kind of desperate frustration did suggest honesty. "Hey, neighbor to the south? Are you the one who sicked that spy clone on me?" Davis went very still. Kurtzman laughed. "Well, then, you already have it. She grabbed it from me a couple of hours ago. Maybe work on your intradepartmental communication a little, asshole." "That particular operative no longer works for us," Davis said softly. Keeping the gun trained on Kurtzman, he glided back to his chair. Time to shift back toward conversation rather than intimidation. "She is very, very dangerous." "You don't have to tell me," Kurtzman snarled, indicating his injuries. "Any information you can share about where she might have gone, anything at all, could be very helpful for me and very beneficial for you." "I don't know where she went," Kurtzman said, now relaxed enough, or fried enough to take another sip from his beer. "But I can tell you who she went with." He swallowed loudly, clearly relishing his momentary upper hand. "She busted out one of the other clones, Dr. Cosima Niehaus, and left with her. They're probably regrouping. All of them and their friend in border services, the one with the clone kid." "I see." Davis had a dossier on all the publicly identified clones, with a special focus on those in the Toronto area. He knew exactly who Cosima Niehaus was. He had thumbnail information on the others, but he wanted more. Having the weapon was his end goal, but he needed more data on all the Canadian clones to help him wipe them out. "I don't think I have to overemphasize this," Davis said softly, waggling his gun ever so slightly to overemphasize it. "But if you should recover the weapon, I expect the copy I am owed." He would vastly prefer for Canada not to have a copy at all, but that could be taken care of once the weapon was safely in his possession. Kurtzman's eyes traveled to the gun and back, and he transparently considered some question in light of Davis having gotten into his apartment, and made a decision. "Right, well, I do have a plan." Davis raised his eyebrows and bobbed the tip of the gun ever so slightly in an encouraging fashion. "Sturgis had a backup copy, I'm sure of it." Kurtzman licked his lips. "I've got people on his apartment, searching his car, his favorite bar, this club he was a member of. We'll find it." "Excellent," Davis said, lighting up another cigarette one-handed. "Then all I have to do is watch you." Kurtzman paled and then coughed. "You're not supposed to smoke in here," Kurtzman said. "I have cartridges." "Vaping is for children, Mr. Kurtzman." Davis took a drag on his cigarette. "I will see what I can do about Valdez." "You know," Kurtzman's face twisted into a speculative grin that Davis wasn't at all sure he liked. "I might be able to do you a favor there." Davis frowned at the word favor, and Kurtzman coughed again. All I mean is, if you want to go after the clones, I have something that can do that. You see, I have their genome, from the test Sturgis did." "That test?" Davis started, and then paused to control his rising anger. No need for Kurtzman to know that he had wanted it to be fatal, wanted that easy way to get rid of the irritating problem of a useless, expensive, high-risk program that would be a PR disaster for the agency if it ever got out. Human cloning was on par with experiments in psionics, as far as he was concerned. He could see the headlines now. "The men who stare at clones." "It was just a mild virus. Everyone recovered." "Sure," Kurtzman agreed. "But that's the genius of the tag weapon, isn't it? Easy enough to connect that genome to a much more fatal virus, extremely contagious, and one that people without the genome markers, non-clones, will be unknowing carriers for." "You made this?" Davis asked, with reluctant respect. Kurtzman's grin widened. "I had a feeling they were going to be a problem. Plus, I wanted to do some more testing, and that was an easy, complete genome to work with. Ran off a bunch of samples. I have a few in that cooler over there if you'd like to take it with you. Something in Kurtzman's logic didn't track. If the virus is harmless to a non-clone such as yourself, why not simply inject yourself with it and walk out the door with no one the wiser? He watched Kurtzman's grin start to fade. Don't tell me you're afraid of needles, Mr. Kurtzman. Hey, be my fucking guest, all right? Kurtzman gestured at the cooler. I've got cotton balls and rubbing alcohol in the bathroom. You can shoot that shit up in your veins anytime you like. But don't come crying to me if somebody weaponizes it before you do. The moment someone else figures out you have the markers, they can write a virus that targets you. And then tag, you're it. Kurtzman took another slug of his beer. You have any enemies? Because that's the kind of vulnerability they'd love to exploit. Not that many, Davis said. Not anymore. Top to bottom was a refurbished Victorian situated in Midtown Toronto. It boasted 3 floors of fun, 2 bars, an indoor pool and sauna, and a simple bracelet system to indicate consent to participate. The employee pointing Alison and Donnie to the locker room explained as much as they climbed the stairs. You've got the white bracelets, so everyone knows you're prospective members. That means they'll wait to be approached. But the man who had followed her and Donnie up from the foyer was nothing if not persistent. It was getting a little weird. Is he following us? She asked Donnie, as they wound their way past a workshop on safe rope work and Japanese knots. Who? Donnie asked. His eyes were tracking an elderly couple standing in line for the swing, who were both talking a bit too loudly about their recent ski trip to Blue Mountain and how they wished that more people from the club would join them next time. That guy, Alison said. The one with the bad tattoos. That's everyone here, Donnie said. Maybe he recognizes you? Alison's stomach flipped over. Of course. It wasn't enough that her return to Toronto that morning had been underscored by worry over a still-recovering Charlotte, or by Sarah and Delphine's fascination with the young U.S. clone, Dana, who had joined their drive across the border, or even by Donnie's explanation for why they needed to visit top to bottom again. But the media frenzy surrounding the outing of the clones showed no sign of letting up. There was a real chance that everyone at the club knew she was a clone. Was there a clone kink? If there wasn't one before, there certainly was now. There was a slang term for that, a joke that Cosima made once, something like Rules 69. She shuddered. She and Donnie had joined their other club on the advice of a French marriage counselor's best-selling book, just to spice things up, not because they had any desire to be objectified. Well, no more so than was reasonable. Donnie attracted a distinctly different crowd than she did. The man broke more bears' hearts than Christopher Robin. Do you think everyone here knows? Alison murmured as they entered the locker room. The man followed them. About, Well, they are staring, Donnie whispered. Although people tend to do that when you know. Alison peeled off her yoga pants. Everyone here is naked, Donnie, she said. Learning to be comfortable in our own skin is one of the best ways to fight the harmful beauty standards that— Fine, Donnie said, pulling off his sweater. Which locker should we be looking for? 2194, Alison said. Found it. Donnie shuffled over in what Alison suspected was his way of attempting to be subtle. Do you have the combination? Alison nodded and slid over. The locker popped open on her first try. Inside were some of the usual sex club accoutrements. Condoms, lube, deodorant, an extra pair of swim trunks, and shower sandals, one of those useless plastic combs that men always seem to carry. But there was also a set of keys, and on the keyring, a flash drive keychain. Her hand closed over it and she slammed the locker door shut. No sooner had she done so than a man's large hand slammed over the locker. Hey there, said the man who had followed them inside. Good evening, Alison said, lifting her chin and pointedly avoiding eye contact. Have you met my husband, Donnie? The man didn't answer, just snorted. Whatever. I'm gonna make this easy for you. You give me what you took from that locker and I don't paint this room with your brains, okay? Beside her, Donnie gasped. Alison drew on her theatrical training for inspiration. She took a deep breath all the way down to her diaphragm. What would Sarah do in this situation? Sarah certainly wouldn't let this thug have the flash drive. Alison risked a glance at him. He had stripped down just like they had, possibly to avoid being marked as a civilian. "You don't seem terribly well equipped to do anything very scary," she said. His ears pinked, and so did other parts of him. "Honey, you're not my type." He nodded with his chin. "Him, though? I'd hit that like the wrath of God." Donnie both shrank back in embarrassment and puffed up with pride in the same movement. "Well, that's something we have in common, then," Alison said. "Maybe we can be friends after all." "I'd consider it. All you have to do is give me that drive. Very friendly. Then I'd take it back to the guy who's paying me and you two enjoy your evening however you like." Alison watched as the elderly couple entered the locker room with a pair of middle-aged women with matching rockabilly haircuts. The elderly couple must have gotten tired of waiting for the swing. On any other night, Alison would have taken this as her opportunity to jump in line. "Or what?" Alison asked, raising her voice. "Or I take it from you by force," the thug said, as though she were very dense. "By force?" Alison raised her voice still louder. The elderly couple, caught mid-rant, scowled at her and then at the man hovering over her. Alison gripped the flash drive tight in her fist. "I do not consent to your offer, sir," she shouted. "You are violating my personal space." The rockabilly punk women who had entered the locker room stopped untying their boots. "Is there a problem?" one asked. "Yes," Donnie and Alison said in unison. "This man is harassing my wife," Donnie added. "He is violating the rules of the charter." He pointed at the huge sign at the entry to the locker room, which read, "Safe, sane, and consensual, 24/7, 365. The elderly couple and the rockabillys narrowed their eyes. An extremely well-cut, in all senses of the term, gentleman with a cotton candy-colored buzz cut stepped into the locker room. His harnesses glowed with pink LED lights that flashed in time to the beat of the music outside, and he wore a black bracelet indicating he was a vetted member who could be safely approached in the event of harassment. For a moment, they all eyed each other intensely, like some standoff at the end of a profoundly sex-positive cowboy movie. "Sir, do you have a member who can vouch for you here?" the man in the harness asked the thug. Alison decided to take a chance. "He's a clone perv!" She pointed at the thug and quickly pushed back against Donnie. "He said he jerked off while watching my sister on TV, and that I was designed in a lab to fulfill his sick, perverted fantasies." "Okay, yeah, we're done," said the man in harness, and he moved on the thug with the bad tattoos. The thug seemed to awaken to his circumstances, fainted to the left, and tried running out of the locker room. "No running!" Donnie shouted, pointing at another sign on the opposite wall of the locker room. The man in the harness grabbed the thug and wrestled him to the ground with a brutal efficiency that, in another context, Alison would have found highly erotic. "I fucking hate singles night," the little old lady said. Then she scowled. "Wait, did you say clone?" You know, I think coming out as a clone to my parents was legit way more stressful than my actual coming out, Cosima said. Sergeant Priantha glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Did your parents know?" "About what, that I was gay or that I was a clone?" Sergeant Priantha shrugged. "Either, I guess." "The clone thing was new. I only told them after Delphine and I were sure we were going to get married. My being gay was old news, like, I think they knew before I knew, if that makes sense. They've always been really cool, though, and that made things a lot easier. Telling them I was a clone was way harder." "In what way?" Vivi recognized this technique. Sergeant Priantha was trying to keep Niehaus talking. If she kept talking, the trauma would not overtake her. She would not slip away entirely. They could have been talking about anything so long as it made Niehaus feel more comfortable. But the radio was on, and the clone outage was all over the news. In fact, that was probably doing more than anything else to keep Niehaus from falling apart. Her shock at clonedom being public had overwritten the horror of the arrest, the threats of deportation, and being treated like a lab animal. She had babbled for a while about how they always knew they had a plan for it, but it was still so unexpected, fallen silent, then interjected commentary about various clone sightings around the world, because apparently she knew all of them. Upon hearing a clip of a snobby woman's crisp, cool voice describing her own experience as a clone, Niehaus had muttered, "Hey, fuck you too, Rachel," and switched off the stream. So now they were talking about what up until now had been the biggest secret of their lives. A secret that Vivi herself had only begun to process before the rest of the world learned it. Well, not the entire rest of the world. Her parents must have known. They had participated in the program with her cousins. They had always known. And they had always kept it from her. They had known she missed the other girls. They had known why. They had watched her get lonelier and lonelier, and then tougher and tougher. And still, they had kept the truth from her. Had they ever planned on telling her? Or had that ambush in Venezuela that ended their lives come too soon for some timeline they had planned out? I guess it helped that I learned how to keep a secret, Niehaus said now, as though having read Vivi's mind somehow. Vivi wondered about that. How close were their respective thought patterns? Was there a kind of hive mind among the clones? Or was it just a weird genetic quirk, like that annoying patch of dry skin between their eyebrows? I had kept this one secret about myself for so long, Niehaus continued, that keeping another one was really easy. It was like I traded one secret for another. I had been out for years when I found out about this, though, so I guess it's not like a real trade. It's not a straight exchange. So to speak, Vivi said before she could stop herself. Beside her, Niehaus pulled back and gave Vivi a once-over. "Did you just make a joke?" Niehaus poked her in the arm. "Are you okay? Did you hit your head? Let me look at your pupils. You might have a concussion if you're actually trying to be funny." "I'm funny," Vivi said. "People think I'm funny." Arun thought she was funny. "Sure." Niehaus turned back to address Sergeant Prianta. "To answer your earlier question, I guess I just worried that they wouldn't believe me, or that they would think I was crazy, or that they would think this was some roundabout effort to find my birth parents. I didn't want them to think I wasn't happy with them. I didn't want them to think that I'd gone on the hunt for my birth parents and then come up with this insane conspiracy theory that somehow justified my existence. I wanted them to be happy for me. I was happy for me." Now it was Vivi's turn to stare. "You were?" "Of course." Vivi scowled. "But your genome was copyrighted, and you almost died," she said. "Multiple times, including just now, like 2 hours ago." "Well, yeah," Niehaus said. "But I found my sisters." "And so has everyone else, apparently," Sergeant Prianta said, as they slowed to a stop in the middle of the street. Niehaus and Vivi both tried to get a look at the house. It wasn't easy, what with the swarm of camera trucks, drones, and people having taken over the front lawn. "If those rubberneckers kill my Japanese maple, I am going to lose it," Niehaus muttered. "Go around the back," Vivi suggested. "You can badge your way through the neighbor's house, and we can hop the fence into the backyard." "That's an inappropriate use of my privilege as a police officer." Vivi met Prianta's eyes in the rear view. "Hey, at least you get to work with a badge. Must be nice, having a magic wand you can wave most of the time. At least I don't work for an agency that disavows all knowledge of my existence the moment things get the slightest bit difficult." The neighbors were, if anything, accommodating and apologetic. They felt terrible, just terrible, about this attack of the media on their Trinity Bellwoods enclave. "It's awful," the woman who opened the door for them said, as she breezed them through a gallery of modern art that also happened to be a kitchen and solarium. "I mean, we left Brazil to get away from this kind of thing, do you know? Mrs. Alfonso had, according to the many trophies along her mantelpiece, once been the star of a very successful telenovela.
Remember to draw your blinds, yes? They send the little cameras up to perch by the windows. The little ones, like insects, like
mosquitoes, Vivi said, to distract from Niehouse's shudder.
Yes, like parasites. Bloodsuckers, the lot of them. And their cameras too. Awful.
Mrs. Alfonso paused to kiss both of Niehouse's cheeks.
Here, don't ruin your clothes. Take this stepladder.
The back door recognized Niehaus and let them in. The door had barely opened for them when a blonde blur assailed Niehaus. Cosima. It was that woman who had threatened Vivi with the syringe, showing an entirely different side of herself. Cosima, Cosima, Cosima. The French woman was kissing her wife all over. Her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose, until Niehaus redirected her attention and sealed their lips together. Vivi watched the tension drain out of their bodies as they stood together, swaying with their arms and lips locked. When the kiss broke, their foreheads leaned together. The other psycho, Sarah, emerged from the living room into the kitchen. You okay, Cosima? The perky clone, Alison, followed at her heels. Yeah, are you all right? What happened? Do you need anything? I made a big soup. Well, it's more of a stew. Well, it's more of a curry, but it's gluten-free and vegan, and it has lots of turmeric and ginger and... I want a shower, Niehaus murmured. Okay, her wife said, and led her by the hand toward the stairs. A man in dad jeans and a Raptors windbreaker wandered in from the living room. Beside Vivi, Priantha straightened and seemed to become more alert. That was interesting. Hi, he said. Hello, Priantha said. Fancy meeting you here. Who is this again? Sarah asked. Sarah, this is Sergeant Gyasara Priantha, he said. She's the one who arrested Cosima, and I'm guessing the one who broke her out. She didn't do it alone, Vivi snapped. And you're the one who bumped into us at the airport? Alison raised an eyebrow. Vivi Valdez, Vivi said. CIA. Or at least, I used to be. I'm probably persona non grata on the farm at this point. Oh, you're Arun's friend! Alison's face lit up. He had such nice things to say about you in Boston. He was so worried, you have no idea. He really tried to put a brave face on it, but I think he was super freaked out. He'll be so glad to hear you're okay. Vivi had thought that the level of mortification she'd endured up until this point had a hard limit somewhere. She had yet to find it. It was boundless, unfathomable. It was as though every single boundary in her life had abruptly decided to crumble. The boundary between her past and her present, the boundary between her work and her admittedly miserable excuse for a personal life. Of course the clones had met Arun. Of course they had talked about her while she wasn't there and couldn't defend herself. That was just par for the course at this point. Alison breezed past her to shake Priantha's hand. Hi, Gyasara. I'm Alison. That's my husband, Donnie, and my sister, Sarah, and you know Art. And his daughter, Charlotte, is taking a nap in the basement right now. She's not feeling well. She's a little better right now, actually, said a new voice. The fever seems to be going down. It sounds weird, but I think those truffles really helped. They really settled her stomach so she could have some soup and... Vivi froze. The newcomer's face didn't have the older look of the other clones. Except for the straighter nose, it looked exactly like her. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. It couldn't be. Why would she be here? Why would any of the American clones be here? What could possibly have drawn them up this way? Vivian? The woman said hesitantly. Is that you? She moved further into the room, closing a door behind her. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Dana. She hesitated, swallowed. We were friends. She looked tired and worn out, and her skin was raw and rashy. Some green paste that had doubtless emerged from a Parisian pharmacy and found its way into Delphine Cormier's cosmetic arsenal was smeared across the worst of the redness. She was wearing comfortable shoes, a t-shirt, yoga pants, and a pair of classic pearl earrings that went with everything. It struck Vivi all over again that each of these women, for all their similarities to her, had a life that she didn't. Every choice she'd ever made, they'd made a different one. Only it hadn't really been her choice, had it? They'd taken her out of the experiment, taken her away from her cousins, from the family that had made this other clone so comfortable in her own skin. And somehow all these clones, the older ones too, had managed to be successful and had families, and were all living picture-perfect lives that looked good on social media, and she had been burned by her own handlers. Why did she have to be the odd one out? Why her and not one of the others? What was wrong with her? Why did they get to have each other, and she had only the memory of this woman standing before her, the one she learned to think of as an imaginary friend? "Hi, Dana," Vivi managed. It didn't sound as nonchalant as she had hoped, more like resentful. Vivi. Dana made an abortive movement as if she had wanted to embrace her and was stopped by Vivi's expression. Or maybe by her smell. "Any chance there's another shower?" Vivi muttered, not making eye contact with anyone. "I just broke into a secret Canadian defense lab filled with experimental animals and viruses so I could beat up some bad guys, and I'm not exactly making the best first impression here." "Little late to worry about that, isn't it?" Sarah Manning muttered. Local legend had it that once upon a time, there was a secret bar in this hotel that had only 24 seats and was styled like a submarine. It had portholes that looked out into a glowing blue nothingness. Then more modern minds had taken over, and the submarine became the mezzanine, and now Alexander Davis sat staring at the head of an alarmingly large moose mounted over an alarmingly deep fireplace in the hotel lobby. Presently, a server arrived with a dry martini approximately the size of a child's wading pool and a telephone. "We're charging your device behind the bar, sir," the server said, "if you prefer to make your call from there." "No, it's local and I don't have a travel plan," Davis said. "I just didn't have the time to get one before I flew. Planning a funeral, you see." The server paled. "Oh, sir, I'm so sorry. Let me see what I can do for you. Are you staying in the hotel?" "Yes," Davis said, and picked up the phone. "Thank you." When the server departed, Davis sipped his martini and dialed the number. It picked up on the third ring. "How did you get this number?" The affected accent on the other end was as crisp and tart as a green apple. "Who is this?" "I'm a person who can find your real phone number, Rachel," Davis said. "And I'm a person who is very interested in any information you have to share about your sisters." "They're not my sisters," Rachel snapped. Davis smiled. This was going to be easier than he thought. "Forgive me. I did not mean to presume." "Are you a reporter?" "No." "Are you the police?" "No, but I can keep the police away from you. I think you might want my help with that. Things are about to get very interesting for you and your fellow clones, Rachel, but especially for you. All sorts of closed investigations must be reopening by now. Dyad, Dr. Leakey, Brightborn. You've had your finger in every pie, haven't you?" Rachel chuckled. "My goodness. Did you dig that up all on your own, or did you have to connect with me on LinkedIn?" "I'd like to help you navigate those waters, if you'll let me. I saw your interview recently, and I think we could really help each other." There was a long pause, during which Davis took another sip of his martini. He peered up at the moose head over the fireplace. From this angle, it appeared to be giving him a very judgmental glare. "Are you in crisis communications?" Rachel asked. "I deal with crises, yes," Davis said. "To be honest, I would rather discuss my specialties in person." Another long pause. Perhaps he had overplayed his hand. Rachel was right to be careful. Doubtless there were any number of creeps coming out of the woodwork, now that the clones were exposed, and now that this very attractive woman had outed herself as one of them. Probably she'd had to field all manner of offers. Davis shuddered to think of the sheer number of pornographers who were pitching new and terrible scenarios based on the revelation of human cloning. "Meet me in the morning," she said. "The Artichoke Room downtown tomorrow, 9. Am I meant to know where that is? If you can find this phone number, then you can certainly find that room. Liquid courage seemed to be the only solution to the kind of social awkwardness brought on by second-generation clones meeting each other after a prolonged separation. Cosima hanging out with the cop who'd arrested her, self-same cop having some deeply weird and probably toxic authority figure chemistry with Art being pissed at Charlotte for running away, Charlotte being ill with whatever the Americlone Dana had, and Alison and Donnie having blue-balled someone who had tried to take Sturgis's hard drive from the sex club where they were prospective members. Sarah had needed some brain bleach after learning that last little detail, which explained why she had been drinking something out of a glass jam jar that Cosima had labeled fairy wine, which Sarah suspected might be the kind of joke that she was no longer sober enough to get. Much like the truffles, the fairy wine was homemade, and it tasted like someone had mixed hippie perfume with white lightning. Weird little bits of dried herbs and fruit swam at the bottom of the jar. Alchemy, Cosima had reminded her as she poured the first shot, was the beginning of all science. Still not drunk enough to forget about the hard drive, though. So, Sarah said, interrupting the flow of Dana telling a rapt Cosima and Alison what it was like growing up in a self-aware group of clone cousins, while Art and the Mountie looked on from the sofa like benevolent fucking parent figures. Vivi was leaning ominously against the wall, like a sullen teenager with assassin skills. Have you cracked that drive yet? Let me look, Cosima said, sitting up from her sprawl on the floor to open up her laptop. You know, you're almost making me wish I'd gone into the social sciences, she added over her shoulder to Dana, who laughed. And you're making me want to learn more about Evo Devo, the younger clone responded as Cosima's computer beeped. And here we are. Delphine, Cosima yelled, and her wife came in from the kitchen and joined the others peering over Cosima's shoulder. Let's see what we've got here. Some kind of computer program? Do you think we should send this to Scott to untangle? I don't think we should send this to anyone, Vivi said, her voice cutting across everyone else's. She's right, Cosima. Look at this. And this, it's a program for gene splicing. The eagerness on Cosima's face slowly morphed into horror. It's Sturgis's weapon. Of course it is, Vivi snarled. I don't get it, Alison said. What is this thing? Genocide, Delphine said. Yup, Cosima said, popping the plosive sound at the end. She sounded empty. Sarah had not heard her speak that way since she was sick. Then again, it sounded like they all might be at risk of becoming very sick very soon. Maybe Cosima was just getting a jump on things. It's a program, a computer program, although for specialized computers that manipulate biological material. You use it to adapt viruses, any virus you want, to be targeted at specific genetic markers, Cosima went on. Like a skeleton key, or a modular wrench with lots of different sizes you can snap on and off. I don't understand, Donnie said from where he was standing against the wall with a bottle of beer. Why would you want to target viruses? Cosima exchanged how do we explain this glances with Delphine. On the surface, it does sound like a great idea, a way to target genetic markers in a population that's at risk for certain diseases and immunize them. And some people have been trying to use viruses to attack other diseases instead of healthy tissue. This would give that surgical precision, Delphine put in. But, of course, Cosima said with a sigh, this was designed for the Ministry of Defense, and what they did with it, or at least what Kurtzman threatened me with, I don't know if the MOD even really knows about it, was customize a virus that would only affect clones. That's why my cousins and I got sick, Dana said from the couch. Yes, but that was a non-fatal virus, used for a test, apparently. Cosima spit out the word. Kurtzman whipped up another that would kill us all, Vivi said baldly. The spy was starting to grow on Sarah. She seemed to be all out of bullshit. She pushed herself away from the wall. And from what I heard, that wasn't the only virus he made either. It's not so much making viruses as customizing, Cosima started, but thankfully Delphine nudged her. And this is what Sturgis made possible? Art asked. He created a thing that could respond to certain aspects of a genetic profile and... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he stared at Charlotte, asleep on the couch with her head in Dana's lap. Beside him, Jay very briefly laid the backs of her fingers on his arm. Are we sure he's dead? Sarah heard herself ask. There's no way we can kill him all over again, right? Hollow, rueful laughter. Wasn't the best joke she'd ever made, true, but it did serve to lighten things just a little. Trust me, I'm not ready for the Cosima Niehaus reanimator phase of my career, Cosima said. I think they'd revoke my degrees. So, Sarah said, and that was when Charlotte's phone rang. Sarah didn't mean to peek at her screen. It was more of an instinctive reaction based on years of snooping whenever she could. It's Kira, Sarah said, halfway to the sofa before Charlotte was even fully awake. She wasn't sure who grabbed her and held her back long enough for Charlotte to answer. Hello? Charlotte sounded half asleep, but she blinked into full consciousness quickly and sat up. She glanced around the room. Every clone and clone-adjacent person stared back at her. Yeah, you could say that. A pause. Yeah, I think that would be best. Okay, hang on. Charlotte took the phone away from her ear. Kira has some things to tell us, so I'm gonna put her on speakerphone. You all have to be quiet, and nobody, I'm not mentioning any names, is allowed to ask her anything. She is fine, and she'll come home when she feels like it. Charlotte waited for the inevitable protest, but her assertiveness appeared to have done the job. No one interrupted. Okay. Charlotte put the phone down on the coffee table in front of her and tapped speaker. Hi, everyone. Kira's voice was tinny through the phone speakers, but even so, it loosened the tight knot that had twisted between Sarah's shoulder blades since the last time she spoke to her daughter. She looked around to see who was holding her. Alison, who gave her a look of immense sympathy. Sarah nodded and patted Alison's hand, then eased herself down to sit on the rug. Alison sat down next to her and took her hand again. I'm in this village, Kira said. It's in the middle of nowhere, and the mayor of the village he just died from this horrible disease that he got from a mosquito bite, even though it's winter. Sarah realized she was squeezing Alison's hand fiercely and made herself stop. The thing is, we know that this genome was at GeneKeep, but it got stolen, and... Kira, Cosima said, is it a francophone village by any chance? There was a long pause. How did you know? Kira asked. Sarah buried her face in her hands. Is it Nazwineg? Jay asked tensely. What is going on? Kira wailed. That's a long story, Cosima said. Short version, that village is in danger and you should get out of there. I can't, Kira said, and she sounded angry now as well as despairing. I promised I'd try to help them, and besides, the virus doesn't hurt me anyway. But there's another one that could, Sarah yelled, unable to hold back any longer. Silence. Don't hang up, don't hang up, don't hang up, Sarah thought. Was this how Siobhan had felt when she insisted on going her own way as a kid? Had she truly been this scared all the time and somehow kept a lid on it? Can anyone explain this mosquito thing? Giassara asked. Is that the transmission method for the virus? If they were anything like the mosquitoes we saw in Kurtzman's lab, Vivi said. They're not organic, but tiny drones that mimic insects. She met Jay's eyes. It's an aerial dispersal mechanism, like plague blankets for the 21st century. If you deployed these in the field, they could go completely unnoticed until it was too late. People would think a real mosquito had bit them and spread the disease. Kira blinked. Wow, that's creepy as fuck. That's how they're doing it. Cosima looked sick. It makes sense, Vivi agreed. They're not exactly subtle in winter in Quebec, but testing them at extreme temperatures might be part of the design process. The populations in that part of Quebec have been the focus of a lot of genomics research already, Cosima mused. It's called the Founders Effect. Francophone colonizers arrived in that area and then remained really isolated. The region is known for a certain... If you say je ne sais quoi, I will shoot you in the face, Vivi interjected. Cosima frowned. Genetic bottlenecks is what I was going to say. All right, then. Sarah poured herself more fairy wine. She poured some for Vivi as well. Sounds like Kira needs some backup. Agent Valdez, how good is your French? Unexpectedly, the spy blushed. Even more than Charlotte, she reminded Sarah of herself when she was younger. I, actually don't speak any. I do. Dana volunteered from the couch. Everyone turned to look at her. Dana smiled. I did my ethnography fieldwork in northern Quebec. Rachel Duncan arrived at the artichoke room almost a full half-hour early. She handed the man at the door her boiled wool trench coat and cashmere pashmina, mentioned her name, and asked to be shown up to the room now, please, rather than waiting for her guest to arrive in the street-level bar. She had calls to make and emails to answer, she said. The host snapped to attention and led her past mirrored pillars and a long marble bar to a curving staircase and up to the second level, where a private dining room sat opposite the main dining room. Would Madame enjoy a coffee while waiting? The host asked. I would like a chilled bottle of cava and the jamón ibérico, she said. You do serve the ibérico at breakfast, yes? Yes, we do. Will there be anything else? Possibly some melon to go with the ham? Chef has just returned from St. Lawrence Market. Rachel took in the room. That's probably a good idea. She caught herself adding up the bill in her head and then frowned. Those days were over. She was returning to the life she was always meant to live. Her time at the call center was just a hiccup, a cosmic punishment of sorts, as though her eye and her womb and her parents somehow weren't enough. Adding up bills, budgeting for anything but attracting top talent to a long-term project was for suckers. To succeed, one had to project an image of success. Did successful people worry about the bill? No. At least she hadn't once upon a time, and there was no reason to do so now. Not when Mr. Creepy Phone Voice would be handling the bill. Which he would be, if he wanted to get anywhere with her, personally or professionally. Possibly some oysters, later on. She added, chimichurri or mignonette? Rachel smiled. Surprise me. The host nodded, made a small gesture that could almost be interpreted as a bow, and departed. Behind him, he drew a set of gold brocade curtains halfway, partially shielding Rachel from the mostly empty hallway. It was still very early. The punters downstairs were getting coffee and croissants, not having the kind of meetings that justified sparkling wine and oysters. Not the kind of meetings that would reverse the course of one's life, or at the very least, put one's life back on track. No more boxed wine, she reminded herself. No more microwave dinners. No more looking for discounts and adding up reward points. No more public transit. People like her weren't meant to ride the bus. Rachel peeked out from behind the curtains, ascertained that the hallway outside was completely empty, and began her examination of the room. She started by running her fingers under the inlaid table, searching for small listening devices. Then she did the same with each chair. She took out a small pinhole camera and examined each corner of the room. Nothing. No surveillance, beyond what the restaurant itself already had in place. That didn't mean Mr. Creepy Phone Voice wouldn't have his own devices, of course. In fact, she expected that he would, which was why she had pinned a hidden camera and mic to her white blazer in the form of a brooch that resembled a chrysanthemum blossom. The device would send the recording directly to an innocuous-looking app on her phone, and the app would encrypt the recording and store it, clouded, with a file designation that responded only to her key. Rachel might have been living a very different life these past few years, but she had not forgotten the basics. One couldn't be too careful. And one should always be ready to find points of leverage. Sitting at one end of the table, Rachel switched the device on. The host returned a few moments later with a bottle of cava, 2 flutes, and the ham with melon. Behind him stood a rumpled-looking man who reeked of cigarettes. Rachel's stomach plummeted. Everything about this man screamed government. The bad suit, the terrible haircut, the studied blandness and blankness of his affect. "Hello, Rachel," he said when the host left. His hand was dry when she shook it. The skin was almost papery. He had the wrinkles of a longtime smoker. It made his age difficult to determine. He might have been nearing retirement, or he might have been middle-aged and simply aging poorly. "My name is Alexander Davis." "Mr. Davis," she said. "No, please, Alex is fine." He gestured at the chair nearest her that still had the view to the hallway. "May I?" "Please." She reached for the wine. "I hope you'll join me." "Naturally," he said, and watched her pour for both of them. She held the flutes at the perfect angle to minimize foam and rounded each pour off with a twist at the end to catch the last drops. "You do that very well," he added. "My parents paid a fortune for finishing school." "Your parents?" There was a question that he wasn't quite asking. "The people who raised me," Rachel said. Alex nodded. "I'm very interested in your story." Rachel speared a piece of ham with melon. She wished she had asked for avocado toast as well. It was just so insufferably ubiquitous now that she felt like a stereotype even ordering it. "I imagine it would make for excellent television," she said. "I could write up a memoir within 6 months, I think, and package it for media production." "Is that what you think I'm here to discuss?" Alex took a drink of his cava. "Media options? Isn't it?" Rachel could play dumb, or at least naive, if she needed to. She needed to get him on the recording, admitting to who he really was and what he really wanted. That way, when he inevitably tried to pull a fast one on her, and these rumpled, sad-sack G-men always did, she would have something to hold over him. "Let me show you what I'm here to discuss," he said, and reached for something in his pocket. For a moment, Rachel had the horrifying thought that he was about to expose himself. Maybe he really was an agent. Maybe this was a casting couch of sorts. She rested her hand on the table and used the drag of the tablecloth to draw the ice bucket and the bottle of cava within easy reach. But he withdrew a device instead and placed it on the table. Rachel didn't recognize the brand. It looked rugged, like it was meant for use in some active field of combat. The feeling in the pit of her stomach got worse. She watched Alex turn the device on. She watched him flick through menus, and then she watched him reveal Alison's face, and then Casima's, and then finally Sarah Manning's face. Unlike the other photos, this one wasn't a close-up. It was a photograph of 2 women, mother and daughter. "This is what I'd like to talk about," he said. "I think you know these women. I think you know where they are, and I think you can introduce me." Kira had gotten so big. She was tall, like her father, but she had Sarah's eyes and her messy hair. She still had her dimples. She looked happy. In that moment, something opened up inside Rachel that had not opened up in years. A door she had kept locked so long that the lock itself had rusted into nothing, had become just as brittle as the rest of her. She was going to hurt this man. She was going to maim him. Permanently. "You seem pretty good at introducing yourself," Rachel murmured. "I'm not sure why you need me." "I need you to tell me what you know," he said. "Who are these women? What makes them tick? Will they cooperate with further research?" Rachel dragged her gaze away from Kira's face. The picture had clearly been peeled from someone else's social media profile. It was a group photo, taken at a party. Kira was obviously laughing at something someone had said. How many times during that period of her life had Rachel been truly happy? She had been comfortable, of course, contented on her good days, busy all the other days. There were horses and dance lessons and piano and other accomplishments for young ladies straight out of an Austen novel. But had she ever thrown her head back and giggled? Had she ever really let go like that? She couldn't remember. She very much doubted it. Kira was different. Kira was happy. Kira had had a chance. Maybe it wasn't a chance at a normal life, but it was a chance at a complete one. A full life. A long life. So long as this Nimrod never got his hands on her. She phrased her next words carefully. "How much is it worth to you?" Alex smiled. "I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement." "I don't want an arrangement," Rachel said. "I want a contract. I want a new life. I want my old life back." It felt good saying these things aloud, and she was totally safe admitting to them because she was about to bash this man's head in with a bottle of wine and then get on the next plane out of the island airport. "I believe I can help you obtain at least some of those things," he said. "Can you?" Rachel decided to test her intuition. "Is the American government prepared to do that for a Canadian clone like me?" If possible, Alexander Davis went even more pallid than he had been before. Then he tried to play it off with a rueful smile. "Is that obvious, is it?" "Only to the initiated." Rachel demurred. She reached over to the ice bucket, topped up their glasses, and used it as an opportunity to leave both the ice bucket and the bottle within easy reach. "Now, on to my terms. You're right that I do have a great deal of information to share on Dyad, on Dr. Aldous Leakey, on the Couture engineering." "Couture?" Rachel sighed. "Designer. You fucking Philistine," she added mentally. She cleared her throat. "The designer genetic engineering going on at the Brightborn Fertility Labs, even the activities of Neolution, and the final fate of P.T. Westmoreland." She took a sip of her wine to give herself time. "Do those things interest you?" She needn't have asked. The avarice written across Davis's features was answer enough. His pupils were blown, his nostrils flared, his hands twitched across the tablecloth, grasping as though he could pull the secrets from her with his liver-spotted fingers. "I find those things very interesting, yes. You see, until recently I had no idea about your existence. And for someone in my position, that's very troubling. I want to know as much as possible about how everyone involved kept the secret, and who in your government lied to whom in mine." Rachel nodded. "In exchange for information on Project Leader and my cooperation in giving it, you will help reinstate me into the lifestyle to which I am accustomed." Davis's lip twitched. A furrow began to form between his unruly brows. "I have spent years thinking about what exactly I would need to make my return to polite society," Rachel said. "I want a house, not a big house, something tasteful, on the bridle path, possibly Rosedale. I would even countenance the Scarborough Bluffs for the right property. There are some truly lovely moderns out there now. The point is, I want out of my apartment, and I'm not settling for some little beehive condo downtown." Alexander Davis looked almost delighted at this particular demand. Perhaps he had an eye for real estate. Rachel had no desire to find out. The most important thing was that she get out of this room, but not before making Davis think twice about his plans for Kira. "I also want my membership at the Oxford Club reinstated, and my membership at Veracity, the women's-only club." Davis blinked. "That sounds manageable. Of course, with regards to a house, that's a bit. I will, of course, need a line of credit at Casturian Row," she breezed on. "I'm not sure if Michael still does that kind of consultation, but I need him. I cannot possibly rise from the ashes without his assistance." "Michael?" "They'll know who I'm talking about. Ask for Miss Duncan's former stylist." 2 high points of color had risen in Mr. Davis's face. "That is a tall order," he began to say. "Well, think of it this way," Rachel said. "You're not the only government interested in decades of cutting-edge research into human cloning. I will have other offers. I'm giving you the chance to sweeten yours." Davis reached to shake her hand. She went to shake it, but he was holding it oddly underhanded, as though his wrist wouldn't bend properly. There was something hidden in his sleeve, almost like an uncapped ballpoint pen. It was a syringe. Rachel scowled down at his hand, then scowled up at him. "Really, Mr. Davis, this is the height of gauche," she said, and changed her grip on his hand. She pried his thumb completely backwards. Tears rose to his eyes, and he fell to his knees almost instantly. He made a strangled sound that was almost as indignant as it was pained. It was the sound of a man who had too long been a stranger to agony. "You think that just because we're clones, we're all the same," she said, and picked up the wine bottle. "I made that mistake once, underestimating my sisters. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you will be sorry." She swung the bottle high and brought it down straight on his wrist. She felt something come loose inside his hand. He started to howl, but closed his lips immediately, as though he didn't want to give her the satisfaction of making too much noise. "That's not a very nice face," Rachel said, and grabbed him by the hair. She slammed his forehead down on the edge of the table. He collapsed utterly. Some remote part of her hoped that he would lose consciousness entirely and piss himself. She didn't have time to watch, though. Retrieving her bag, she pulled the curtains of the artichoke room shut and dashed down the stairs. "I've had an emergency meeting called," she told the host. "The gentleman upstairs has had a very important phone call as well. Please don't disturb him," she smiled. "Oh, and he'll be handling the bill. Thanks ever so much." Canada geese honked overhead. Vivi's eyes opened to the milky winter light of morning in Toronto. Distantly, she heard garbage trucks rumbling along. She had chosen the topmost floor, the highest ground possible, literally and figuratively. She lay stretched out on a futon in Cosima Niehouse's office, which was less of an office and more of a grow lab. The green smell of growing things wasn't bad to wake up to, even if some of them were still illegal, according to the U.S. federal government. On the air mattress across the room from her couch, Dana stirred. "Go back to sleep," Vivi murmured. "Coffee," Dana groaned. She curled herself into an even smaller ball and buried herself under the striped wool point blanket. "Oh my God, I'm so hungover." "Yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't have mixed tequila with Tamiflu." "Alison said it would make me feel better." "Alison says a lot of things. You should go back to sleep. You've been sick, and we have a long day of driving ahead." The night before, they had decided that Dana and Vivi would go together to the village, combining their linguistic and espionage talents. Sarah had raged about going with them, but everyone else had eventually convinced her that 2 was already enough clones, and she had quieted somewhat when it was decided that someone named Felix, apparently Sarah's brother, would drive them. "I'll be fine," Dana said. "All I need is some coffee and a huge, greasy breakfast. Charlotte says there's something here called breakfast poutine with tater tots and poached eggs and hollandaise sauce and bacon, Canadian bacon." Vivi pushed herself off the futon and hopped into a pair of trousers and shouldered on her holster. "I'll see what I can do about the coffee, but I'm not bringing it up. It's 3 floors. You'll have to come down and get it yourself." "Be right there," Dana said around a yawn. Vivi passed the Mountie and the Canada Border Services agent conferring quietly in the hallway, averting her eyes politely and listening as hard as she could. "I just think I should see what he can tell us," Jay was saying, and Art responded with what sounded like, "Not alone." Leaving them to it, Vivi made her way to the kitchen. The coffee machine was some engineering marvel of glass and copper. She was still staring at it in bewilderment when her phone rang. She had replaced the chip in her phone after Alison told her Arun was worried about her. but she hadn't really expected him to call. Did this mean she could come in from the cold? She lifted the phone to her ear. "Valdez," she said. "You're alive," Arun said. She smiled despite herself. "Not for lack of trying. Let me guess." She could hear his own smile on the other end of the call. "You're fighting polar bears up there in the Great White North?" In the living room, Jay and Art were standing up. They peered out the front windows. The paparazzi had either stayed all night or were changing shifts. On the floor, Sarah sat up. On the couch, Alison sat up too. Vivi caught her own feet drifting in the direction of the living room. From behind the sheer curtains, she saw a flurry of flashing lights. "More like a bunch of mosquitoes, actually," she murmured. Outside, a car horn blared. Long, short, short. SOS. From the stairs, Vivi heard Dana's voice descending. "The hell is going on out there?" she called. "Global warming must be really off the rails if mosquitoes can survive a Canadian winter," Arun said. Sarah twitched the curtains aside. Immediately, she hung her head low. "Fuck me." "Yeah, about that." Vivi switched the phone to her other hand, so her gun hand was free. "I think I'm gonna have to call you back." Behind her, Dana rushed into the living room. "Who is that woman? She looks crazy." Sarah made a growling sound. She launched herself at the door and yanked it open. "Meathead! Come off it right now!" Through the open door, Vivi could see a solidly built clone with wild blonde hair. Said clone was standing up through the moonroof of a salt-splattered all-terrain vehicle. And the vehicle was slowly but steadily plowing through the crowd of reporters. Vivi wasn't sure who exactly was driving the vehicle. Whoever it was very short. "Out of my way, sheep," the woman bellowed. "Or I will make you all into pancakes." "Who the hell is that?" Vivi asked. "That's our other sister," Alison said. "Helena."
You're listening to Orphan Black, The Next Chapter, starring Tatiana Maslany. Produced by Realm, your portal to another world. Orphan Black, The Next Chapter is written by Malka Older, Lindsay Smith, Madeline Ashby, Mishell Baker, E.C. Myers, and Heli Kennedy. Produced by Marco Palmieri and executive produced by Molly Barton, Julian Yap, David Fortier, Ivan Shebeg, and Carrie Appleyard. In partnership with Boat Rocker Media and BBC America. Audio produced, sound designed, and edited by Amanda Rose Smith. Based on the television series Orphan Black, produced by Temple Street, a division of Boat Rocker Studios. The theme music is by Two Fingers.